these are some more general tips that I would give that were very useful for us. The first thing was be yourself. Honestly, don't try and make it feel corporate, and don't try and copy someone else's style from another year either. Just be yourself. And in our case, I really loved using a lot of quotes from people I admire because they just make sense to me, and somehow it reminds ourselves that it's what we're doing is bigger than advertising, and we're not operating in isolation, but it's also like saying things the way they are. And in my case, my tone tends to be really punchy, and that's part personality, part being French, and part working on women's health, where there's a lot to be pissed off about. So in a way, paper writing can be very therapeutic as well, and you can treat it as a catharsis as much as an exercise of storytelling. The second thing was honesty. Like, being honest is so important, and it would be so ironic for us, given the journey we've been on, to desanitize the category from blue liquid and sort of very artificial ways of representing women to something more authentic. It would be so ironic for our entry and paper writing to be trying to almost be the Instagram version of the reality. And it's important to acknowledge in your paper and in your presentation things that might not have worked so well, or things that have been extremely difficult that you've had to overcome, or that you've stumbled upon what was wrong, mistakes you've made, and all of that is what makes us learn. And for us, was what we called, the fact that this journey was almost like a period. It was sometimes awful and really painful and really messy, but also, you come out of it and you just feel a sense that, you didn't do that for nothing, and there's a function into it. So the fact that Live Fearless for us wasn't going anywhere for a few years, and you see here, like the first type of execution that we were going into, it was really key to acknowledge that it wasn't brave and it wasn't good enough, and that we needed to essentially take it to the next level. The third tip would be craft the shit out of it. Craft the shit out of your paper, out of the examples you're giving, out of your presentation. And of course, there's a matter of storytelling, but it's not just like the best way of doing problem, idea, and results, because essentially that's the overall structure. I think it's also the minutiae of how you're chaptering this journey, how your titles are arresting, how you're bringing interesting illustration points to make it breathe, but also just capture people's interest and imagination. So in our case, we were using even some snapshots from just different journalists or different books to show the situation and how ridiculous it was. And it wasn't, pure category data. It was going way beyond that to try and sort of bring it and focus it to our case. But all of that peppered in the entry was really helping make it just more relevant in culture and more interesting. And then obviously clarity was really key. So that's why chaptering really helps, getting some steps one after another really clear, but also giving a sense of momentum. And speaking of momentum, I think jeopardy is always an interesting sort of stumble upon point in a journey when you've had it, that is super important and useful for the jury to know. In our case, we've encountered so many obstacles along the way. We really wanted to talk about them, but it's also how we use creativity at a strategic account and executional level. It's how we completely turn those obstacles on their heads that was really interesting for the jury to hear, and how we use creative judo for Blood Normal, turning the censorship on its head and using it within the creative, that has been so transformative. So I think for everyone, really including the moments of jeopardy and how you've overcome that will be extremely relatable and extremely useful for everyone. Which leads me to the fourth point about making everyone proud. Obviously, in all papers we write, there's always this point of these were the results and the outcomes, but it's easy to be quite dry and corporate, or to try and be sort of almost a bit sort of military about, oh, and we achieved this and this and this and this and that, and therefore we're amazing. But I think, you know, remembering that everyone in this industry wants to be proud means that, you know, your results aren't just necessarily the hard KPIs, it's also the power of anecdotes, the power of like sort of smaller scale changes, how it's changed them. So in our case, like how the campaign hasn't just changed, you know, people's attitudes and preference, but has also changed the media rules and how it's completely overturned decades of, you know, really wrong definitions of decency when it comes to women. It's also how it's changed the entire category and how everyone has followed suit after us. Or it's simple quotes from people online or writing to us saying things like, just in time to teach my daughter not to be ashamed. And all of that contributes to a sculpture of results that can make people feel compelled, but also proud, because it reminds you that you can make a difference through your work that isn't just for the brand or for the business, but also for society and institutional change. And then the last lesson was be useful to others, because obviously I'm sure you can win awards and be selfish at the same time when you write papers. But actually, you know, isn't it more interesting to just be generous about your thinking? And what we've tried to do both in our written paper and in our presentation was to just be super open about all the real things that happen, all the tips, all the way we even call it among ourselves, because, you know, even if your ideas, you know, are amazing, you'll have others, let others have them or read them. And actually the ability of having a community of planners that can, you know, compete while making each other better is a chance. And this sharing culture is something that is extremely valuable, but also totally unique. And I'll just conclude by saying that, you know, the APG is very special. There is no such thing in France, for example, where I come from. And maybe that's why actually the discipline there in France isn't as mature as it is here in the UK. And when I arrived in London 7 years ago, I was in awe at the APG and I wouldn't miss a single event. So winning an APG Grand Prix last year felt extra special. And I just wanted to wish all of you good luck, and I'm really looking forward to reading your amazing papers soon. Thank you.